Welcome to The Third Stone from the Sun, Secrets of Jimi Hendrix, tonight on Odds and Ends. Tonight we're interviewing Jimy Bleu and Corey Washington. Jimy Bleu has performed worldwide as the longest running and is widely considered the most authentic Jimi Hendrix tribute artist since 1968. And Corey Washington is an expert on the life and music of Jimi Hendrix and is also the author of the book Jimi Hendrix, Black Legacy, A Dream Deferred. So stay tuned, and we're going to explore the ubiquitous boundaries of Jimi Hendrix. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Odds and Ends. And tonight I'm very honored and excited to have two men and my buddies as well to talk about the secrets of Jimi Hendrix, things about his life and his music that most of you might not know. We have Jimy Bleu, who's an incredible performer and guitarist. I saw his performance at Flushing Town Hall. I was astonished and amazed. He was just incredible, playing guitar behind his back with his teeth, etc. And I have Corey A. Washington, who is the author of the book, Jimi Hendrix, Black Legacy, A Dream Deferred. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. So let's get right into it, man. We're dealing with James Marshall Hendrix, who was born, I should say, November 27th, 1942 in Seattle, right?
Exactly. Right.
Then, how does he come to live in New York? Because I know he lived in New York with the Aleem brothers for a while. This is long before Jimi Hendrix was known as we know him as Jimi Hendrix. The Aleem brothers took him in. Do you know what brought him to New York? How did he come to New York?
Yeah, Corey could hit you with that.
Okay, Corey, yeah. Any idea?
Well, I would say the trajectory probably would be Jimi Hendrix, Seattle, military, Nashville with Billy Cox, and then from Nashville, then he went to New York probably to make it in a bigger arena, because at that time his genre of choice was R&B. So there you had more opportunities for him to make it in that field. So, you know, he's doing his thing in the Apollo and, you know, Harlem, and then the like you said, meets up with the Aleems, as well as Faye Pridgeon, who recently died. Okay. You know, all of those three amigos plus Jimmy, the Aleems and Faye, you know, were like two peas in a pod, or three peas in a pod, or four peas in a pod, and right. They kind of painted the town red in Harlem. And then from there, of course, you know, we know Jimmy went to the Village and Greenwich Village, and then obviously overseas. So that's his trajectory, so to speak. And
but he also, at one time, I wanted to say also, he played with Ike and Tina Turner, the Isley Brothers, Little Richard, Wilson Pickett. So he was kind of getting around, although a lot of people, I think, didn't understand where he was coming from. I understand in some circumstances, people kind of didn't want to work with him anymore because his sound was, he was hearing a different drum. He was hearing some different things that people weren't so much accustomed to. Later on, we learned that was part of his genius. So, Mr. Bleu, when you do his show, are you channeling the spirit of Jimi Hendrix? How do you think you play it so well? Because it is, I mean, it's like seeing Hendrix himself, man. It brought tears to my eyes when I saw it at Flushing Town Hall. How do you do that?
I approach it as an actor, playing a role. No, I don't channel him. Getting back to your point of what you said that earlier about people not liking him because of his musical talent. That wasn't just it. Jimmy was very irresponsible when he was younger. You know what I mean? Didn't show up at gigs, you know, things like that. Played what he wanted when he's supposed to lay in the pocket with a certain back. Let's say Wilson Pickett, he's backing up somebody. He played what he wanted. That's very irresponsible, very disrespectful. So there's good and bad with Hendrix. So you have to be very discerning.
Okay. But he seemed to garnish the respect of so many guitarists like John McLaughlin, B.B. King, Eric Clapton. I mean, everybody respected what he was doing, even though sometimes they couldn't understand or reproduce it.
Yeah.
But he became very quickly, I guess you would say, a household word in the music industry, especially in the rock field of rock and roll. Now, some people credit Jimi Hendrix as being the father of heavy metal or fusion music. What would you say to that?
It's a fusion. That you hit it right on the head. I detail in Corey's book, as a matter of fact, how I consider Ray Charles one of the first great Black fusioneers, I call him.
Yeah.
And Jimmy was going in that direction. Also Buddy Miles, but Jimmy was going in that direction as well. Especially before he died, he was coming into a lot of genres. When he was in England, he hung around Caribbean people. So that influence was getting ready to come into the set as well. A lot of different things he was going to explore musically.
Now, this is kind of the ethos of Mr. Washington's book. He was more in his later years exploring his Black ethnicity and heritage, and he had plans, maybe you're saying, to bring more Caribbean music or amalgamation of Native American music and jazz into one potpourri.
Oh yeah, let me give you a quote, a very famous quote that people like to overlook. Jimmy said, "I'd like to have my own country, an oasis for the gypsy-minded people. My goal is to erase all boundaries in the world." That's dangerous talk right there. I'm talking dangerous talk from the highest paid rock star of his time.
Yes. Well, yeah, he did become, I would say, ubiquitous and probably one of the first African American rock and roll legends ever. I don't think anybody has ever come to that level of respect like Hendrix had achieved. I mean, Prince may have come close, but it was a different type of artistry. You know, he was more in a more commercial vein, where Hendrix, we could say, was completely an original artist.
I think a lot of times Jimi Hendrix was so original and did so many things that it's people, especially Black rock guitarists, some of them have been afraid to even, want to be compared to him. I mean, I understand that you don't want to be compared, you want to be your own artist, but at the same time, you have to be humble and just be obvious about where you got certain things from,
Right.
So with Prince, I think I have a whole chapter in my book, Black Legacy, where I detail the comparisons between Prince and Jimi Hendrix. And I try to go beyond the most obvious, two Black rock guitarists, So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that Jimmy did that deserves credit, but, we're still learning about him, really.
Yeah, it took me a while to kind of get comfortable. I mean, I knew he was awesome, but then I started to realize not only was he an awesome musician, but he had a genius way of writing lyrics. A song is really, in my opinion, a story orchestrated with sound. And Jimmy's songs were stories orchestrated to sound. To me, it made you listen to the lyrics and try to get inside the meaning. I understand that some of the songs that he wrote was about his life around his mother and father, like Castles Made of Sand. Supposedly he wrote that because he observed them, maybe bickering a lot. And these kind of things affected him.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of cryptic lyrics in that song where it talks about the woman in the wheelchair. Jimmy's
Yes.
mother was very frail toward the end of her life. Like you said, the bickering and arguing. I think Leon Hendrix even brought out how there was a part in there where they came and took him away for the foster care. That part is detailed in there. So Jimmy has a lot of lyrics that if you really know his life story, you can pick and choose and say, okay, that's what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I would say he would probably be one of the most major influences on rock and roll guitar in the 20th century. What do you say about that, Jimy Bleu?
Most definitely, but when we talk about Jimmy, you can't leave out the other players. who made Jimmy. And when I say made Jimmy, tweaked Jimmy, because Jimi Hendrix didn't come out the box Jimi Hendrix. He was tweaked into that, and then he came of age and came into that character towards just about a couple of years before he died. But he was tweaked along the way, the same way Michael Jackson, huh?
Who tweaked him? Would you say tweaked him?
Yeah. Well, there was two people in the beginning. There was Linda Keith, who was the girlfriend of Keith Richards from the Rolling Stone. And basically she got him a guitar, but he was doing his own thing in the Village, Jimmy James, things like that. And he didn't really want to sing that much. He wanted to, and she was like, no, blah, blah. Here, change that. Put this shirt on. Here, come here. She did. If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be talking about Jimi Hendrix. I'm serious. She brought the people down to see him, and then criticized him, critiqued him about what he did wrong, because she's getting ready to bring more people down. You know what I mean? She said, listen, I'm gonna be able to listen, you got to blah, 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 blah. You got to get this. So he basically, and then later on, once he went to England, it was Chas Chandler.
Right.
Who I spoke to.
Was the bass player with the Animals.
Yes. I spoke to him for 2 hours. He detailed what he did with Jimmy. You were talking about the lyrics and things like that. He came of age into that. Jimmy was writing, he was into science fiction, he was writing a lot, but he didn't know nothing about structuring songs and producing a song. That's where Chas came in, because let's take Purple Haze, for example. Jimmy, Purple Haze all in my brain. I see stars and so many, it was like 8 verses. Chas would look like, no, wait a minute. Here, let's cut it down to here. Let's go into the hook, blah, 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 blah. And then when Jimmy would solo, he'd be like, don't give him everything at once. Here, just give him a little, you know what I mean? Little things like that are produced. I was going to say earlier, same thing Quincy did with Michael. Exact same thing. So you can't talk Jimi Hendrix without talking about Chas Chandler.
Beautiful. And you're right. I heard from watching an interview of Leon Hendrix, he said that Jimi Hendrix loved Flash Gordon and Buster Crabbe.
Yeah.
He was always into sci-fi, science fiction. And Jimmy, at a young age, loved, astronomy. And so Third Stone from the Sun, Jimi Hendrix called planets the stones. And it just so happens that Earth is the third planet from the sun. So there we get that title. Yeah. And Mr. Washington, Corey Washington, I want to say, where do you think that, from what your research, where do you think Jimi Hendrix was going to go, or trying or attempting to go with his music next, if he had not died?
Well, if you take into account the last year, maybe 69, 70, you could hear more of a funk fusion in there, as well as jazz fusion. But, when you take, just like Jimy Bleu mentioned earlier, you have to look at the players that were around him. You had Billy Cox, who brought that more of a funky, earthier influence with his bass playing. So obviously that's going to come through in his music. Then you also had Mitch Mitchell, who had a jazz background, and you hear that in his playing. So Jimmy was taking all of these things and making more of a modern type fusion sound. But he could have gone in any direction. He could have worked with the jazz greats of that time. You see what Miles Davis did, and those people in the fusion area. He could have did more of less of like a funkadelic, Parliament funkadelic type thing. A lot of these people, when he died, it's like they took what he was doing and went into the arenas that he possibly could have gone into. So that's why I look at what people did after he died as to what direction he could have taken his music.
Well, I think he probably influenced many of those people, especially like Ernie Isley, Jimmy Ray Vaughan, and many others. One interesting thing, since you mentioned his death, we have a book here about the 27 Club. It's interesting that Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, Jim Morrison, Brian Jones, and Janis Joplin, they all died at the age of 27, and so did Jimi Hendrix. That's an interesting phenomenon. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a coincidence. Do you have any idea why that might have happened that they all seem to die at the age of 27?
Is that for me or Jimmy Blue?
Either one, yeah, or both.
Well, I mean, I've just was thinking about this recently. Jimmy was like a couple months away from being 28. So I always imagine, what if he would have died after November and December? He would have been 28. I think that would have killed that whole narrative, because you would have had, I think Robert Johnson kicked it off, and back then, a lot of Black people didn't live that long, but for him to die so early, I think that kicked it off. And then they kind of pieced it together with some of these coincidences. But a lot of these rockers or whatever, they were targeted by the government. So I don't know whether their early death had to do with their hard living, fast living, combined with wanting to take some of them out. But, I have my own theories on Jimmy, but, I'll just leave it at that.
Yes, I know that there are some allegations. There was a documentary called A Perfect Murder, which was allegedly pointing at Mike Jeffries, who at one time I think was managing him. And supposedly he was taking up, to I understand, 40% of Jimmy's earnings, as well as the Animals, Eric Burdon and the Animals. And he didn't want to renew his contract. And so there was allegations that maybe there was some foul play there. I don't know. We don't have to speak on that unless there's something you could add to enlighten us.
Well, just briefly, there was a lot of foul play just surrounding, things that kind of make people question whether it's Jimmy's lungs being filled with red wine, whether it's Monica Danneman, another suspicious character, and I think in the 90s or 2000s.
German figure skater.
Right. She all of a sudden wanted to kill herself for some reason. That's kind of suspicious. And just so many people. Devin, was it Wilson? Devin, jumping off a building. I mean, a lot of these people, and Michael Jeffries, some sort of weird plane crash where only way they could identify him was by his jewelry. And, there was never really any, certainty about his body being identified or anything like that. So, I mean, you could just research this stuff and you would at least have to ask questions about it.
Sure. And allegedly, Jimi Hendrix was allegedly kidnapped by some kind of mobsters in London and held, no one knew where he was for 2 days or so, or 3 days.
I think that was, correct me if I'm wrong, Jimy Bleu, wasn't that up there at Woodstock where he was kidnapped? It was actually in New York City, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that was the second time, or I believe it was the second time, because there was one time he was kidnapped and he was roughed up very badly, so much so it scared him. And he gave a lot of his personal items to his protege, Velvet Turner. And basically he went into hiding for a while.
But why did they rough him up? For what reason?
That one, I don't know, but the one that you were referring to, consensus is that it was a scare tactic by Mike Jeffries to get, Hendrix to act right, things like that. We really don't know. The thing is about Mike Jeffries, when I spoke to Chaz Chandler, that was his one regret with Jimi Hendrix, was that he had to deal with Mike. But he said without Mike, he wouldn't have been able to get Jimmy to the platform that he was at. Mike had the connections to do that, because especially racism, we think racism is bad today. Yikes. Back then, how did Jimi Hendrix do what he did?
Right.
Especially getting on stage with two white guys.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, my next point would be, was he kidnapped? Because I understand that when Jimmy had formed quickly the Band of Gypsies using Billy Cox and Buddy Miles, he felt a different type of feeling and music was coming through him. He kind of wanted to, I understand, remain with those two guys instead of the original members of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. But Mike Jeffries said, no, Jimmy, come on, man. You are the Jimi Hendrix Experience. This is what's making the millions of dollars. We're not going to change. And so do you think that might have been some of the tension that created some of these kidnappings and beatings, roughing them up?
Man. We don't know the inside deal.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We're outsiders. We can only speculate on that. It could be. I've heard. I'm very close with Billy Cox, very close to Juma, who's my mentor. And yeah, I hear different things, but we really don't know.
You
To
don't
me,
know.
that's not important.
Okay, that's cool.
You know what I mean? We can sit up here all night and go,
And
oh, maybe
speculate.
he did that. And also, you have to understand too. I hear a lot of, well, Jimi Hendrix said he wanted to blah 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 blah. Yeah, when he was stoned out of his brain, you know what I mean, on a certain day, and then the next day he changed. Jimmy was very temperamental. All of his girlfriends will attest to that fact, where he changed his mind every day. Well, I think I want to do this. Oh, gee, I want to blah blah. Come on, let's go here. He was like that.
Right. Now, I want to ask you a question. Traveling in America for people of color, there's a good book here by Mia Bay. It's called Traveling Black. Okay. Many top performers, whether it be Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, they could not stay in hotels. They couldn't eat in restaurants. They had to sometimes sleep in cars or buses. Did Jimmy incur any of that, to your knowledge?
Corey?
I would definitely say, obviously, during the Chitlin Circuit days, I mean, traveling in the Deep South, he was very familiar with those ways. I think a couple of times, even in London, a lot of people like to make it seem like London, England wasn't racist, but Jimmy experienced racism there as well. You hear like little stories of the cops harassing Jimmy backstage and things like that. But I mean, as far as in 69 and 70, I don't know, maybe Jimy Bleu might have a little different idea on this, but it seems like some of it was insulated because he was such a big star. You know, they wanted to keep him out of certain things, but I mean, there's probably stuff like, Jimy Bleu said that we don't really even know about, but I'm sure that some people have some.
Yeah. Well, there's a book called Rock Roadie, written by James Tappy Wright. And there's a few incidences in here because Jimi Hendrix, he liked to buy women's clothing because he felt women's clothing is more colorful. He liked to wear their shirts. And there's an instance in here where two London guys actually followed him and his manager to a restaurant and was insulting him, but Jimmy was ignoring it. Half hour later or something, he has to go to the bathroom. The two gentlemen follow him in the bathroom. Another guy comes running out saying there's a fight in there. So Jimmy's manager goes in there. The two guys are laying on the floor with bloody noses. Jimmy did what he had to do. So yeah, he did incur some resistance.
Just a quick anecdote that you made me think about. Martin Luther King, his assassination. I think Jimmy was playing in Virginia somewhere, which was considered the South. And I guess he was in a bar somewhere, and the account came on TV about Martin Luther King being assassinated. And he can actually hear like one of the, racist white people in there saying that, they're glad that he was dead. And, he had to hear these accounts, even though this was Jimi Hendrix, but he was probably like, there wasn't many black people there. So he had to actually hear things like that where he was traveling. So that kind of stuck out to me.
Interesting. Now, what about, I had heard that he was talking with Miles Davis, maybe trying to do an album or something with him and with Native Americans. This is for Jimy Bleu. What do you think he was trying to do? Was he trying to actually create a new music form with them, or change his style and do some more like jazz or something?
Well, first on the top end of that question, Jimmy wasn't a jazz player, so no, he couldn't play jazz.
Okay.
Rahsaan told him that when he jammed with Rahsaan Kurt in I think 67, 68, because he couldn't hang with Rahsaan. He didn't know his jazz. He don't know, he was a blues player. Getting back to Miles Davis, I like to always let people know in my lectures, there was one time Miles was hanging around Sly Stone and Jimi Hendrix for a few months. Let's toss that in your mind. What was that like? And also, both Sly and Hendrix were supposed to be on the Bitches Brew album.
Wow.
Okay, now the reason why, and this is detailed a little bit in Miles' book. The reason why Jimmy was left out, I don't know why Sly was left out, but Jimmy was left out because Miles thought he was doing his wife, Betty Davis. You know what I mean?
The jealous thing.
Yeah. So basically, we were cheated out of that. That would have been something. But let me just destroy this myth and meaning, because I know there's probably people out there watching and whatever who say, "Oh no, they two never played together." First of all, what is the guy? I forgot his name in Room Full of Mirrors book. He details Terry Reid recounting an experience where him and Jimmy were in an apartment. Both of their girlfriends went out shopping. And so it was just Terry and Jimmy. Jimmy was taking a shower and he said, "Hey man, I got somebody coming over, let him in, blah, 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 blah." And it's a knock on the door. Terry peeks through the thing. And Terry Reid he said on my radio show, "He's the only guy I've ever seen who looks like his album." He knew it was Miles Davis. He opens the door and Miles said, "Hey man, I'm here to see Jimmy." And he said, "Oh, well, he's in the shower. Why don't you come on in, blah, blah, blah." Miles said, "I'll wait out here." And Miles took the door handle and closed it. You know what I mean? So then Jimmy came out the shower and said, "Hey man, I hear the door." Said, "Yeah, so Miles Davis out there waiting for you." So Jimmy went out, let him in. They went into the bedroom and they started playing. So when Terry Reid said this I interviewed on my radio show. When he said that, I said, "Wait a minute, stop, say that again." They went into the room and was jamming, meaning Miles was playing trumpet and Jimmy was playing guitar. There's also incidences where Miles was playing electric piano. One time I was in the Jimi Hendrix fan club. We went to one of Miles's parties on 77, and Miles would have the party on the whole block. It was not just his little brownstone. It was like the whole block was partying, right? And so we went up there. We were kids, 16, 17, went up there, and I went in there to get some juice or something. And you could see down the hall, you could see Miles on piano, yelling at Hendrix, and Jimmy on guitar. So they played together a lot. I also interviewed Alan Douglas on my radio show. And basically, he's responsible for hooking those two up. Jimmy used to stay at Alan. He used to have a little room in the back of Alan's studio. And he counts many times those guys got together. So that myth is destroyed. Wow. Is my point.
Right. That would have been interesting. I can't even imagine what it would sound like to have both of them together. That probably was awesome. Now, I wanted to say also, we still live in a country here in America where people of color, because of the color of our skin, our achievements are undervalued, ignored, diminished. When you do your lectures at colleges, and this question is for both of you gentlemen, do you find you get a lot of opposition from people who just don't believe that you could know or should know as much as you know about Hendrix and his life? Have you ever incurred that at all, either one of you?
I guess I can go first. I think a lot of times what happens, it could possibly be because of my age. I was born in 76. Jimi Hendrix was dead in 70. But I think a lot of times it comes from not just my age, but my race. When you bring to the fore things about a man as important as Jimi Hendrix, who's been dead for 50 years, that a lot of these white researchers have not brought to the fore, it creates some jealousy, some tension among some of them, because when you're bringing it's a different perspective. You're asking different questions. You're around people who are of the same race and maybe feel a little more comfortable around you. So therefore, they may open up about some things that they may not have opened up with around a white researcher. There are a lot of different factors, but whenever you bring something to the table, like for instance, just one example, I think I remember the day I found this out. I actually was in New York and I called Jimy Bleu. I was so excited and he was so excited, because I'm pretty sure this information has been out there, but it's not been brought to the fore about Jimmy albums doing well on Billboard's R&B charts. When you go to Wikipedia, there was always talk about his rankings on the pop charts. I had to actually go into Wikipedia and add his R&B pop R&B album rankings on there because it was not deemed important enough. So that's just one small example, but I've had to encounter things like that.
Right. What about you, Mr. Blue?
Well, one thing I like about Corey's book is that he's like me, an avid research and documentarian. I approach Jimi Hendrix objectively. I don't like or dislike Hendrix. I'm very discerning when it comes to Jimi Hendrix, and my information is researched and documented. So when I get the naysayers at my lectures, that I get out of here, blah, 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 I basically can go to the source. I say, don't believe me. Don't kill the messenger here. You know what I mean? Basically, blah, blah, blah. And one such blaring example is that Jimmy didn't have no spirituality. Whereas back in that day, John McLaughlin, Carlos Santana, maybe a couple of years later after Jimmy died, I can name the countless musicians, not just guitar players, who were involved in spirituality while they were pop stars or in the pop rock market, but not Jimi Hendrix. So when I detail the spirituality that Jimi Hendrix was in, get out of here. He just took drugs and got on stage and winged it. This is the general consensus of this guy. They refuse to believe he had any kind of intelligence. But we go through that anyway with our culture, with Black culture. I'm not downplaying whites because if it wasn't for whites, there would be no Jimi Hendrix.
Right.
You know, they had his back. I'm sorry. Basically, but there are, people who, tend to pigeonhole him in one thing. He was just a dumb Black guitar player who happened to play good and took a lot of drugs and didn't have nothing concerning higher consciousness. And that's a fallacy.
Well, there were a lot of other great rock musicians who took a lot of drugs too.
Yeah.
Because that was the tenor of the times. So he wasn't unique. He had no monopoly on that, Yeah.
Jimy Bleu, talk about, remember you was telling me, this was something I learned from Jimy Bleu about the Aleems. You mentioned them earlier, about why did they name their record company Nia Records? Remember that, Jimy Bleu?
Yeah, well, it's not just the record company. Basically, Jimi Hendrix was involved in the ancient Egyptian teachings, and I'm using that in quotes, ancient Egyptian teachings, they would call it Kemetic, whatever you want to call it. He was involved in that back then. The people who got him involved in that are still around today. So there's no disputing that. The thing is, it affected the Aleem brothers so much, whose last names were Allen. It was, Arthur and Albert, Allen, something like that. It affected them so much that these two guys changed their names to Taharka and Tundara Aleem. Aleem is an Islam name. It's not an African name. But those two names, Taharka and Tundara, are ancient Egyptian, quote unquote, names. And that's actually Taharka told me that himself. That's because of the effect on Hendrix. And Hendrix gave them the foundation money to start their own label. And he said, I'll give you this money, but you have to name the company Nia Records. Now, here's a guy supposed to ain't had no consciousness. What does he know about Nia? You know what I mean?
Right.
What is he supposed to know about that? For your viewers out there who don't know what that is.
Of Kwanzaa, am I correct? Nia
that's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
Purpose, right?
Okay.
Purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. I was going to say, I see that you play left-handed. Were you naturally a left-handed guitarist?
Yes, I'm a lefty. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was really knocked out when I saw you playing Jimi Hendrix solos behind your back. I'm thinking to myself, I'm a bass player, but I'm saying I've never tried to play bass behind my back. I don't even know if I can, But it was really incredible, your performance.
Yeah, thanks, man.
People really loved it. I loved it, and it made me think, well, damn, how it resonated with me. It must have been even more seeing Hendrix at that time, because at that time it was all like kind of new. People have
Yeah.
had a long time now to kind of study what he did and try to understand it and dissect it. Although I don't think I have heard anybody yet that really, I think he was gifted from God, like many musicians are. That was his gift.
Mhm.
You know, I think he was mainly self-taught. Is that correct?
Yes. Matter of fact, there was just before he died, he was enrolled in the Berklee College correspondence course, thanks to Quincy Jones. He wanted to learn more about jazz and orchestrations and things like that.
Hmm.
So he was getting his act together on a guitar. He knew his limitations. He knew what he was, and he was hanging around cats who had that together, and it was bothering him that he didn't have it. So
Wow.
basically, he was getting that together. But no, man, he was going to go a long way.
Hmm. And Mr. Washington, Corey Washington, I'm assuming that your book, Jimi Hendrix, that you've written, probably does very well around Black History Month in February.
Yes, a lot of people, they like to focus in on that. What I try to do is, one of the focus things I've tried to do is over the years is to show people that, you have your typical Black history people, your Jackie Robinson, your Martin Luther King, your Malcolm X, so forth. But I think it's important to include Jimi Hendrix in there as well as an outside the box thinker, somebody that maybe didn't start off in the vein of, okay, this is a traditional Black artist, but as Jimy Bleu has alluded to several times, you can't get any Blacker than Jimi Hendrix. I mean, this guy was from the Seattle Central District, like the Blackest area of Seattle. He lived in Nashville, the Chitlin Circuit. I mean, how can you get more Blacker than that? I
Right.
mean, he was in the ghettos of New York City at certain times, in Harlem, after hours spots. I mean, this guy was a Black guy. I mean, why wouldn't you want to celebrate somebody that made it from those, the lowest parts of the ghetto of poverty, who rose up to become one of the most powerful figures in the world of music? I mean, I would want to celebrate that. That's what I try to bring to the fore during those Black History
Mhm.
Months.
Well, that's why it's an incredible thing that you resonated with his music, because you said you were born in 1975. Am I correct?
76.
76. Okay. So at that time here, you've got Earth, Wind, and Fire. You've got Mandrill, Kool and the Gang, Chaka Khan, Rufus. You have all these other forms of music that you could have drifted and attached yourself to, and yet Hendrix obviously seems to have resonated deep in your heart for some reason.
Well,
Yet
that
you
didn't
want
come
to take
until
10 years
later.
and write a book about him.
Yeah, that didn't come until later. When I was growing up in New York City, I think probably my first love was disco music. I think that was disco and hip hop. Of course, all those groups you mentioned, you would hear your mother or whoever playing it around the house. But it wasn't until I was in my 20s that actually I got into Hendrix. So I mean, he was there the whole time, but when I was in New York City, nobody in my neighborhood ever talked about him. I mean,
Were
maybe
you in New York at that time, or where were you?
I was in New York from 76 to 86, and nobody ever talked about Jimi Hendrix in my neighborhood. He was never on any of the Black radio stations. We were all about hip hop, things like that.
Right, right. And Mr. Jimy Bleu, I understand that you actually knew Jimi Hendrix personally, right? You spent some time with him.
Yes, I was in his fan club. I joined right after Electric Ladyland album, and joined this fan club. We was in the concert. Thank the Lord that Juma remembers me out of all of the sidemen. Juma remembers us little kids always getting into trouble, behind the stage or whatever.
Mhm.
So yeah, and basically he didn't know my name, and every time I was around him, there was a couple of other members of the fan club. But he took his fan clubs very seriously. There was also a major fan club in Britain that's run by a woman, and they got all the perks from Michael Jeffrey's office. We didn't
Okay.
get nothing. But we got into concerts for free. That's about it. But they got everything, even plane rides. She got plane rides
T-shirts.
back and forth to,
Yeah.
so basically, yeah. I got to study him and watch him a lot, man.
Now, were you playing guitar at that time?
Yes, what happened is I was attending the High School of Performing Arts in Manhattan, and I got in as a trumpet and trombone major. And then once I saw a clip in the beginning of my junior year, I saw a clip of the raw footage of Monterey Pop Festival.
That was it. It was all over.
Well, I was looking for Otis Redding because I was also doing a James Brown tribute while I was in school. That was very popular. We opened it for Kool and the Gang. The Isleys opened it for all of these, but we kids. And I was James Brown. Then I would go and play trumpet. It's good, you know, Kool and the Gang stuff, and then back out to James Brown. Yeah. That's what I wanted. So when I saw the footage, I was looking for Otis Redding.
Whoa.
You know, because I heard he killed it.
Of course.
So that's what I was looking for. Then I heard about Hendrix, but he wasn't, I wasn't really. And then I once I saw that, I said, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that same week, I changed my major. I took the had to audition again, changed the major. I was playing a little rhythm here and there, and boom, that was it.
So you changed your major from trumpet to guitar?
To guitar and voice, yeah.
And you had to audition for that, right?
You had to re-audition. A technicality. They would have, they didn't care.
Tell us, do you have any new concerts that you're doing? I understand you're one of the leading Hendrix tribute makers. You've been doing tributes to Hendrix for 50 years now, I understand. Am I correct?
A little bit over 50 years. And since 2016, I hooked up with Kiss the Sky. Thank the Lord. I ain't ashamed to say it. Thank the Lord I ran into Mike Gotch, who's the producer of Kiss the Sky, and he needed another Jimi Hendrix player. And together we're a marriage made in heaven, meaning...
Now, what is Kiss the Sky? It's a show?
Yes, it's a Broadway play type show where we present all of Hendrix's important concerts, from Monterey Pop until the Cry of Love tour before he died, in full costume, era equipment, light show that we licensed from actual Joshua White, who did the light show from the Fillmore East. We license his light show. And we also have, in between where I change costume, we have videos that set you up for what's coming next, Hendrix related videos of interviews, sidemen, and things like that. Something that's done by the Beatles. They have Beatle tributes that do that. Sure. Pink Floyd.
Of course.
Nothing with Hendrix. I mean, the guy's family's not doing that.
Right.
This is what I'm saying. So people and the reason why it's important, because people need to see why was Jimi Hendrix important with a guitar? What? There's good guitar players, but what made Jimmy different and stand out? Right. They don't see that. So with Kiss the Sky, you definitely see that.
Now, how long does the show run? It's like 2 hours or what?
Sometimes 3 hours. Sometimes 3 hours, yeah. Okay,
and people actually sit there and enjoy it, right? They don't leave.
If anybody leaves, it's very few. They're like I said, they're not used to seeing that, so they're trying to figure out. It's got to be a catch. They're not used to seeing Hendrix, unless it's the footage of actually Jimi Hendrix. I mean, I come on stage with 2 white guys as experience. I come on stage with 2 black guys as the Band of Gypsies. I come on stage with the 5-piece Woodstock band, and sometimes his original sideman Juma jams with me on that. Then I come on stage with the Cry of Love, where he had Billy Cox and Mitch Mitchell. So it's precise to the exact thing, and sometimes I'm not aware of that. And so my partner, Mike Gotch, he would be like, no, Blue, just show me the thing. No, Hendrix had this on, and blah, blah, blah. Here, change that. Here, change it. You got to change your scarf.
Right.
Little stuff like that, because there's always people out there that's saying, oh, wait, Jimmy didn't blah, 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 blah in that concert. There's always them. So that's who we really, that's one of the people that we really do this show for. It's for them.
Right. Now, you would say Jimi Hendrix mainly played a Fender Stratocaster. That was his main axe, right?
Right.
Nothing else, pretty much.
Oh, well, he played the Flying V. He played the Les Paul, sure.
Right. I bet because of Jimi Hendrix, the Fender Stratocaster probably had a lot of sales.
Well, he was one of the 4 or 5 people who was given the touch guitar prototype. before he died, he was getting into that too. Steve Howe from Yes is another one who was given the prototype when it came out. So Jimmy was getting into the two-hand tapping and things like
Good.
that as well.
Interesting. And Mr. Washington, Corey Washington, um, what is happening with your book now? Is it still moving? Are you still giving any personal lectures about your book? Have you been called to speak anywhere about the book?
No, with COVID or whatever, it's kind of been a dry spell, but hopefully with things opening back up, I can get back into the swing of things. Been working on a documentary, which actually is like the audio-visual version of my book. Not everybody reads, I recognize that. So hopefully this documentary will pick up those people who enjoyed the book as well as those who might have been intimidated. If you hold that book up again, you'll see why I'm saying that. I mean, it's like 500 and something pages, but I mean, every last one of those pages, had to be there. So you might have somebody intimidated by that, but hopefully with the documentary, they can catch on.
Right. Right. Well, before we leave, is there anything that we haven't touched on you'd like to mention, either one of you, before we go?
Corey, anything?
Huh?
I'm asking Corey.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think the title was The Secrets of Jimi Hendrix. I think that was the title that was flashed. And when it comes to Jimi Hendrix, I think that a lot has been touched on, but just to know that Jimy Bleu brought out, this was a man that you can't be the top person in rock as a Black man and just be winging it out there. You can't be the number one moneymaker in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s as a Black man and just be, just going through the motions. I mean, this guy,
extraordinary.
Right. This guy, at one point, the Beatles were on a downturn. The Rolling Stones were, this guy was looked at as, either on their level or above them.
That's
and
right.
and this guy was even though he had a group, he was looked at as the focal point. So here's a man that, high school dropout, whatever you want to call it, all the stereotypes are thrown out the window with Jimi Hendrix. So I just want people to recognize that Jimi Hendrix was pretty much, in my opinion, the singular most powerful force in rock music because of his instrument of choice, which was the guitar, which became the primary instrument in rock music. And he became the apex predator. I think I've heard it before. Everybody looks up to Hendrix, and there's a reason for that. So please do your research on Jimi Hendrix and take him seriously.
Anything to sign off, Mr. Blue, Jimy Bleu?
Yeah, Corey says it all, man. Chuck Berry made the guitar the American is apple pie. You know what I mean? He changed the direction of young kids to get more into rock and roll. Of course, there's Little Richard and there are others, but with the guitar, that became very American. And Jimi Hendrix just took it to the next stratosphere out of here, and definitely should be given credit for that because nobody else has done that since.
Right. All right, gentlemen, man, this has been a lot of fun. I'm quite sure we could go on and on. Maybe we'll meet again. So I just want to say it's been a wonderful conversation with both of you gentlemen. And I'm quite sure we're going to meet again. We'll bring you back again. We'll talk about Jimi Hendrix and some other dimensions in the future, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. And as you know what this means.